man, you gotta be kidding me. So, we made a video yesterday talking about what Ken Hughes said on the Daily Face-Off interview with Frank Saravalli. We highlighted how some of the comments he made based off of the Canadiens and their drafting ideals, you know, what they actually place value in when they select these players. I spoke about how some of those comments allude to the idea of the Canadiens taking Shane Wright over Slafkovsky first overall. Now, I still do, in my heart, believe that that is going to be the case, but yesterday, a whole bunch of comments in that video were going over, hey, Lego, I know you made this video, I know Kent Hughes said this, and I know you have some pretty good points, but you gotta talk about Bob. Come on, let's get Bob and his list on the channel over here. Talk about Bob McKenzie, TSN Draft Insider Analyst, a guy who publishes his own rankings that are seen in a much different light than all the other rankings you're going to go out there and see heading into the NHL Draft. This is mostly because Bob McKenzie does not post his rankings saying, okay, I have this guy better than this guy, I think this guy's going to be better than this other guy, therefore the ranking goes 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not what Bob does to make his ranks. Every time you listen to this guy on TV, he always says the same thing. X out of Y surveyed scouts said that this player is Z. He interviews NHL scouts and people that are actually working with NHL teams. He asks them, hey, what's your top 10? What's your top 15? Or whatever the heck it is that he asks them. And he compiles these lists together and he makes an average that inevitably comes, quote-unquote, Bob McKenzie's rankings. Again, it's not his opinion, it's what the scouts think. And this is why Bob McKenzie's draft rankings are seen in such a different light from the Craig Buttons and the Future Considerations, because a lot of these other outlets just create their own list of saying, okay, I think this guy's better than that guy, therefore he is above him. McKenzie might not think what it is that he publishes is the correct way to go about things, but this is what the scouts say, which is, at the end of the day, the guys who are going to make the decisions. So this is Bob McKenzie's top 10 for the 2022 NHL Draft, which is going to be done next week. And yeah, as I said yesterday, yeah, next week, right? Crazy. The 10th overall spot belongs to Marco Kasper, which is a player we have not talked about on the channel, but is one that I'm very confident in, that I think is going to have a good NHL middle six projectability. You have Matthew Savoie at number 9, Jonathan Lekaramaki at number 8, Joakim Kemell at 7, Jiricek at 6 as well. So aside from Jiricek, this bottom 10 is pretty much akin to what we feel is going to be happening at the draft. The top 5 is where things get interesting, though, because at 5th overall you have Cutter Gauthier, who has actually not been ranked in this range by a lot of the other scouting outlets. 5th overall is pretty ambitious for this player. By the way, he is going to be the last Why I Want video for 2022, so go ahead and check out that when it comes out on Sunday. We have Simon Nemec at number 4, Logan Cooley at number 3, Shane Wright at number 2, and Juraj Slafkovsky at number freaking 1. Now, yesterday we talked about how Kent Hughes said that just a few weeks of success and just a few showcases of prominence throughout the past year, these are not attributes that are going to make the Canadiens put a guy over somebody that they've seen for years and that they've been scouting for years. That kind of alluded to me the idea that they're going to take Shane Wright first overall, because Slafkovsky really rose up during the Olympics, during a few international tournaments, and Shane Wright just did not have that luxury to participate in those places. However, you remember the fact that Shane Wright had been producing for the Kingston Frontenacs in the OHL ever since the guy was 16, 15 years old, so he's been scouted for a while. And he had not been given those same opportunities like Slafkovsky did for the Olympics, etc. So that's why I wanted to highlight Kent Hughes' interview from yesterday. But Bob McKenzie's draft ranking says that Slafkovsky is currently the majority first overall pick amongst the scouts that he interviewed. Now, I get it. You could say that it's selection bias. Maybe Bob McKenzie just happened to choose 10 scouts, and if he chose 10 different scouts, the results would have been different, but either way, he summarizes his findings in the article. 5 of 10 scouts surveyed by TSN ranked Slafkovsky at number 1, while 4 scouts had Shane Wright at the top spot instead. Now, if you're doing the mental math, they surveyed 10 scouts, 5 had Slafkovsky at 1, 4 had Wright at 1. That means there was another scout surveyed here that had somebody else at first overall. Maybe it was Cooley, who really knows? The headline will be that it's the first time this season that includes preseason rankings in September, mid-season rankings in January, and the draft lottery rankings in April, and now the final rankings in June, that somebody other than Wright is at number 1. Now, this next paragraph goes over something that I think Kent Hughes was hinting towards, but that's just my speculation on my part. Slafkovsky was ranked number 5 at the mid-season rankings, but after 2 stellar international tournament performances at the Olympics and the Men's World Championships, scouts have a different opinion of this guy, and they are indeed placing him at number 1. There are, however, 2 points worth noting. If you were to survey another group of 10 scouts, you could very well end up with the same 5-4 split, but in favor of Wright. It's really that tight in the eyes of so many scouts. Okay, there you go. That's the concern that I had about selection bias over there. 2, this consensus ranking, quote-unquote, has nothing to do with the preference of the team, the Montreal Canadiens, that will pick first overall. The club order of their draft selection is not a factor in their survey of scouts and TSN's ranking of players. So maybe they're kind of going out there and saying, yeah, okay, the scouts we interviewed, maybe they're scouts from playoff teams. These are some scouts that are scattered around other squads that might not even have the ability to take Shane Wright, or Slafkovsky for that matter, had they been drafting where they're going to be drafting. Maybe they interviewed scouts that were just outside the wildcard race, therefore somewhat invalidating their opinion on what they believe the first overall pick should be because they're not going to have the opportunity to even use it. It's a peculiar draft year, one NHL team head scout said. Neither of them, Slafkovsky or Wright, are locks to be first-line players in the NHL. I'm not saying one or the other could not become first-liners, they're both good prospects, but unlike a lot of years, this draft does not have any great prospects. There are no slam dunks. There are things I like about both guys, but I have some reservations too. And so, firstly, I'll say this, that's kind of, ooh boy, I mean, these guys have good ceilings, and I know the scouts said the same thing. It's not like they can't become first-liners, but man, that's a pretty harsh opinion of this year's draft, isn't it? If I had to place money on, I would not bet against the idea of Shane Wright putting up 70 or 80 points in an NHL season one day, but, I mean, maybe that's just me, I don't know. The 5 scouts who put Slafkovsky at number 1 on their list do believe he has the best chance to be upgraded from a surefire top 6 forward to a top-line NHL winger. What separates Slafkovsky from Wright for me is that he's bigger, he played harder, he was more consistent with his competitiveness, and he stepped up to produce on big stages, another NHL head scout said. In my view, he has the best chance to be a first-line NHL forward. And so, do you kind of get why I made the video yesterday now? Do you understand why I felt it was important to highlight that Kent Hughes specifically said, a few tournaments here and there, a guy who came out of nowhere after not being as scouted previously, it's easier for us to make a decision on players that we've been watching for years, rather than somebody that just came out of the blue and had a few good showcases at international tournaments. Might I remind you, had Shane Wright actually played at the World Championships for the men, or he actually played at the Olympics, he might have done as well, maybe even better. Shane Wright played at the U18s last year, and he absolutely dominated that tournament, even though he was only 16 years old, and I think that should be a little bit more of an indicative showcase that says, okay, Shane Wright is this good, he might be this productive at the NHL level, he might progress in this way. Elliot Friedman had something else to say that I wanted to highlight as well. On the first overall pick, Friedman on the After the Whistle podcast said he's heard different things from different people. Some teams like Slafkovsky, some teams like Cooley, and some teams like Wright. We might actually have a 3-headed monster at the top of this year's draft, and it's funny because it's not Wright, Savoie, Lambert, it's Wright, Cooley, Slafkovsky. What's working against Wright, though, is the last 2 seasons of the OHL had been wiped out due to the virus. So this is another thing you have to very well put some emphasis on, too. In the year where Shane Wright went to the U18s and he dominated, he didn't play any hockey in the OHL. That season was canned. Had he actually played and played another year with the Kingston Frontenacs, who would have known how many points this guy would have been able to get? And if he had that extra year's worth of experience, who knows how many points he would have been able to get this year? The fact that he pretty much took a year off from playing hockey because of the pandemic and the lack of OHL play is gonna hurt him, and you could say that definitely had a part in him slowing down his production in 21-22, but it feels to me like a lot of scouts are saying, okay, well, he might have slowed down, but Slafkovsky has gone out there and actually showed off pretty well, so we're going to put him number 1. Slafkovsky, out of the 10 surveyed scouts by TSN, was ranked either 1 or 2 by 9 out of the 10 scouts. One of them had him at number 4. Meanwhile, you go over to Wright. 8 out of the 10 scouts had Wright ranked number 1 or 2. 2 of them, though, had him at number 3. There are some other quotes over here from scouts that pretty much say the same things that I'd been saying over here, like teams that rank Slafkovsky at 1 are struggling with Wright's draft year being so average compared to prior years, and teams that like Wright at 1 can't forget what they saw in his first OHL season in the U18s. But I guess this might be the thing to look out for, I guess. McKenzie did say that the Canadiens themselves, it's not like their opinion was considered when they made this list, so for now, Slafkovsky is number 1, but I mean, we've got ourselves a week to see if it really manifests. I still believe that Wright is going to go 1, but yeah, this is kind of funny. Talk to me in the comments, let your thoughts about this list. I hope you enjoyed this video, Juraj Slafkovsky, and bye.